With me in the studio are Yasmine Ahmed, an international lawyer and UK Director of Human Rights Watch, and Natasha Hausdorff, a barrister and legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Thank you both for joining us here in the studio. Yasmine, I'll come to you first. You saw the interview there with Ron Dermer. He described the ICC as, if these arrest warrants go through, as turning into some kind of kangaroo court, and said that the policy of starvation is simply not true.
Well, Human Rights Watch has documented that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. And what we would say is, for an independent international court, as we have seen in this situation, the prosecutor has determined that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that both Hamas and Israeli officials have committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. It will be then for a pre-trial chamber to determine whether, in fact, there are reasonable grounds. The idea that this is some kind of equivalency, it just does not take account of the fact that an international court such as the ICC has evidence before it. It assesses that evidence and it determines whether, in fact, the evidence meets the criteria, the legal criteria.
Natasha, just your reaction to everything that's happened, these arrest warrants, what Ron Dermer said, and now what Yasmine's saying.
It's really unfortunate. I mean, Robert Bernstein, the founder of Human Rights Watch, was clear already in 2009 that this is an organisation that has an anti-Israel bias and an obsessional focus on the Jewish state. The reality is that this is a first. It's the first time the International Criminal Court has sought to apply arrest warrants in a case where it simply has no jurisdiction. Israel is not a party to the International Criminal Court. The state of Palestine, so-called, does not qualify as a state under the recognised criteria in international law. So rather than an independent court here applying the rule of law, we're unfortunately seeing the exact opposite. We are seeing abuses of international law. Lawfare, which is in pursuit of a political agenda, as I say, where there is no jurisdiction, but perhaps even worse than that, where there is no factual basis. Now, you heard a very full rebuttal of the factual circumstances on the ground. The reason that we are seeing the prosecutor advance this libel of starvation is that it is the only way, it seems to me, to shoehorn the situation on the ground in Gaza into the parameters that the ICC deal with, and it is doing so in flagrant disregard of the facts. And may I just come to respond on one aspect of this? Your previous commentator indicated that, if journalists were on the ground in Gaza, the situation would be clearer. There are clear parameters set out by the World Food Programme. They have indicated the daily requirement for the population of Gaza is something like 4,000 tonnes of food aid. We know the figures of food aid that have been going in. COGAT, which is the unit of the IDF...
Well, I did speak to Cindy McCain, and I put that to Ron Dermer, and Cindy McCain's telling me they're not getting anything in. And there is full-blown starvation in northern Gaza. I do want to just bring in Yasmine, because, what Natasha is saying is that there are abuses of international law here. Yasmine, you say that your organisation has documented this and you have seen a policy of starvation. Can you help us understand that? Because we are hearing these phrases being thrown around. What sort of things have been gathered?
So we've documented starvation as a weapon of war. What we have said and how we have found that is that both the fact that Israel has not, and I'm not sure what facts Natasha is looking at, because the UN, independent bodies, and in fact the UK government itself has said that there is famine in Gaza. So I'm really not sure what it's about. But what we as Human Rights Watch have said very, very clearly is that it is not only the facts on the ground that people are in fact starving, that there are children. The UN have documented that there are Palestinian children that have died of malnourishment. But there are also, alongside those acts, we have seen the statements of Israeli officials which have made very clear that these are not just acts, but this is a policy of the Israeli state.
That is what Ron Dermer was arguing against, saying we don't have an actual policy of starvation, we are in a state of war.
The policy is clear. I mean, you see statement after statement from Israeli officials talking about the fact that until Hamas is defeated, they will not allow food into Gaza. That is collective punishment of the entire Palestinian people for the acts of Hamas. That is using starvation as a weapon of war. And I might just add as well, on the point of jurisdiction, I didn't hear you or other people raising these concerns, even the UK government raising these concerns when there was an arrest warrant for Putin.
We'll get to
Russia
that.
is not a signatory to the ICC either.
We'll get to that in a moment, but Natasha, your reaction?
No, the issue of jurisdiction comes down to this invention of a Palestinian state and the legal acrobatics.
Do you not agree with the pre-trial chamber?
I'll just allow it.
And the legal acrobatics on display from the previous prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, at the pre-trial chamber are exactly what I'm talking about in terms of international law being thrown out of the window. That is important because it has repercussions for all law-abiding states and for anyone who actually cares about the rule of law and international legal order. But when we come to look at the facts on the ground, all I'm asking is that we apply numbers that we know about. So the World Food Programme, as I was about to come on to explain, has set out already in October of last year what the nutritional requirements of the population of the Gaza Strip are.
That same World Food Programme is now telling me, though, that there is full-blown starvation,
based
Natasha.
on Hamas propaganda, which unfortunately the international media seem to have very little difficulty in repeating.
Cindy McCain is basing it on her staff on the ground.
Well, let's
that is
be
what
clear.
She's not quoting Hamas.
May I finish on the numbers? Because we know, and in fact, Ron Dermer's numbers seem to be a little bit out of date. The most recent update from COGAT is that in excess of 500,000 tonnes, 500,730 tonnes thereabouts, we're looking at nearly 30,000 trucks of humanitarian assistance over the last 7 months.
So how is starvation happening?
Let's
not
may I finish the point? There are two aspects here.
It'd be useful to know why you're saying, why is there starvation there?
Let me answer
Or are you saying that there's no starvation?
Well, you've just heard Ron Dermer, who has more information than I think all of us put together.
And more than the UN and aid agencies on the ground.
May I finish my sentence? Saying that there is no starvation in Gaza. But what we do know is that a couple of weeks ago, the last time I checked, there were 650 trucks which were inspected by Israel that were piling up on the border of Gaza post-inspection.
Rafah, the Rafah crossing where Israel has closed. Is that where you're talking? Whereabouts are they piling up? Sorry, but whereabouts are they piling up?
After inspection at Nitzana and Kerem Shalom. If you stop
Kerem Shalom they have not even been at that. You know why they're banged up at Kerem Shalom? No. Is because humanitarian organisations cannot get to Kerem Shalom because it's so dangerous.
Well, because we have,
and because you know what, humanitarian organisations have been targeted by Israel.
No,
we documented 8 incidences. Human Rights Watch just came out last week. 8 incidences where humanitarian convoys were in fact targeted by Israel.
Yalda,
despite the fact that they had supposedly been deconflicted.
Yasmine, I'll just get Natasha.
What we do know from the Fatah authorities, and these are the so-called moderates that run the Palestinian autonomy in the West Bank, is that Hamas are targeting humanitarian aid workers in order to generate a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We also know that aid organisations on the ground are struggling with distribution because Hamas is stealing aid,
not because they're being targeted by Israel.
No, Israel doesn't target humanitarian aid workers.
No, so what happened with those incidents? What happened with the World Central Kitchen, with the medical aid for Palestine?
The people who have been on the ground, the real experts here have been clear that the measures that Israel takes to prevent civilian casualties, including providing humanitarian corridors. I mean, the gentleman earlier was suggesting that people cannot move. Well, that's nonsense because 900,000 people.
So all of the humanitarian.
I've got about 30 seconds to go.
It's not borne out by the reality or the facts on the ground.
I don't know what reality that you're speaking about because it's not a reality that the UN or anyone else.
Okay, and we'll leave it there. But thank you both for joining us here on the programme.